So our next speaker is Lance Weiler, who is an award-winning filmmaker and self-distribution expert. His first film, The Last Broadcast, cost $900 to make and has to date grossed $4 million worldwide. And it was the first film that was ever released digitally across theaters in the US. And he's going to talk about his next film, Head Trauma. Oh.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming today. Thank you, Liz, for having me here. It's an honor to be here to talk to you about filmmaking and DIY distribution. Basically, my background is I have been making films for probably about 17 years. I started on celluloid, with celluloid, had a Bolex camera, processed film in my bathtub when I was a teenager. And basically, from there, started working in the film industry. I was a camera assistant, well, actually, I'm sorry, I was a camera runner and a PA, and then a camera assistant and a camera operator. And I worked with some really great directors of photography all over the world, mostly in the commercial film industry. And I would always kind of take money and put it into my own work. And in 1996, Stefan Avalos and I started a film which would become The Last Broadcast. What's interesting about that, now that it's over 10 years ago, was at that time it was a real revolution to be able to make films. You know, the fact that you could get prosumer gear, the fact that you could digitize something. And believe me, we were on the bleeding edge of a lot of that in terms of building our own systems to be able to do it. Now it's commonplace. But the fact that it is so common now is actually probably more of the problem, because as you well know, so many films are made, and it really comes down to the actual distribution of it. I mean, that's what the whole day is about. So in terms of when it came time to make my next film, which was Head Trauma, there was quite a bit of time between The Last Broadcast, which came out in 1998, and when I released Head Trauma in 2006. I went off and I did some work in the studio system, which was totally miserable, and I felt like I went through the 5 stages of grief. And I kind of took that and the experience of being in a horrible car accident where I went through the windshield and I was in intensive care for 5 days, and I lost part of my memory. And when I came home, I was plagued by these crazy, vivid nightmares, lucid dreams, and my sleep patterns were all disrupted. And I kind of combined those two things, the 5 stages of grief and the idea of fragmented memories, and created Head Trauma. Now, I have to say that when I started Head Trauma, I initially thought, okay, you know, this is going to be a 28-day shoot. You know, you kind of trick yourself into things, you know. You're like, okay, we're going to totally be able to do this. It's incredibly ambitious, and we're going to shoot it in 28 days. Well, it ended up taking 90 shoot days over the course of a year, and it was a $126,000 film. So I added a couple zeros to my budget. And basically, Head Trauma was, in terms of the structure of it, was profit sharing with all the cast and crew. And based on them helping me, we were able to get a lot more value out of the film than we would have otherwise. I want to run a trailer real quick, and then I'll go more into the details. So if you guys can cue that up for me. Thank you.
No place really. I just needed a change. But I'm back now and I'll fix up my grandmother's place. That's voodoo. Something bad happened in the house while I was gone.
Your grandmother died, and there were lots of people swatting in. They would come and go at night. Sometimes you could see shadows moving in the house.
Hello? I've been having these horrible nightmares. I've been seeing weird things in the house. Mary, I can't stay there tonight. teach you something. I don't think it's human. I think it wants to kill the person he saw what he did.
I need the still waters of the dark lake as damnation and redemption remain.
So basically, with head trauma, I'm very interested in creating worlds around the work that I do. I think media consumption is very much changing. We live in an on-demand culture now. And so when I started the film, I really started to think about how I could tell the story across multiple screens, how I could make it cross-platform, make it cross-media, how I could actually create digital assets that I believed would help me all the way through the process. So while we were actually scripting the film, we created a very elaborate site, and it took probably about 7 months to do. This is the site here. It's actually an online graphic novel, and all underneath it are all these hidden things. And I felt that that was important to the construction of the film because not only did it shape tone for me, it also came in handy later when I was trying to convince people about what the vision for the film was. So for instance, we have really great sound design in that film. A lot of it comes from the fact that I had these digital assets and I had really strong dailies, and Skywalker Ranch ended up helping me I got 5 days on a stage for free and did all my mixing, but a lot of it came from doing assets early on that showed them how dedicated I was to the film and what the vision was for the movie. Those same assets came in handy many, many times throughout the making of the film, not only with getting it up and going, but also in terms of attracting interest from an audience. Because I know that it's been echoed many times today, but really, I knew who my audience was for the film. I knew that they were independent filmmakers, and I knew that they were horror-related fans. And I knew how I wanted to try to achieve them. So I actually sat down and I mapped a very elaborate plan for where I wanted to be and those milestones that I wanted to hit with it. So that was a very important thing. And some of the stuff that I basically did was I embraced the idea of Web 2.0. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. It's kind of, for anybody that's not, it's kind of this new generation within web technology that allows people to communicate easier with one another, that enables them to basically a lot of the services are free, basically. So, like Delicious would fall under that, which is social bookmarking, Feed Burner, which is like the ability for you to burn an RSS feed. And what I did was I took some of that philosophy, I took some of the Web 2.0 aspects and I used them to market the film. So I kind of started this basic embed and spread campaign. And basically what that meant was, it was really simple. Some of it involved, simple things like video, which there's tons of video sharing sites that you can use. I had set up a MySpace page for the film, but what I also did was I created my own kind of channels, or what I felt would be a channel. And when I say that, I mean, I created something as simple as this. This right here is an open source Flash player. You can get it through SourceForge. And I detail a lot of this stuff on my open source site that I have called workbookproject.com, but I'll get to that at the end. But what was interesting about this was, as part of that embed and spread thing, when I went out on the road, I did a 17-city theatrical release for Head Trauma, which I bootstrapped. I had no money, and basically what I did was I booked a number of speaking engagements all throughout the US, and I used my social networking pages, blogs, all kinds of other things to help spread the word about it. So I didn't spend any money on publicity or advertising. It was all done grassroots online. And this player I used when I was out on the road, I would actually update it through my cell phone. And what it does is it's just various conversations, either with people who were involved in the film or me being on the road. And the value of it was, because it could be easily embedded somewhere else, people actually started to take it and put it in other, MySpace profiles. Some people put it into their blogs. And I just kept broadcasting. I had no idea how many people would listen or not. And what started to happen was I started getting these questions from all these people all over the world. And all of a sudden, I had this channel while I was out on the road that I would just update over my phone, and people were knowing what I was doing all over the world, but they didn't have to just come to my site for it. It was out and it was being spread all over the place. And that ended up being very valuable for me in terms of being able to market stuff. Another thing that I did was kind of like a guerrilla search engine optimization thing, where head trauma is kind of a very generic term. You do a head trauma search in Google, and you're going to get a lot of medical documents and some other weird things. So I decided that I was going to do a lot of interlinking, and I actually ended up building out, and I guess in some ways it's kind of like Google bombing, but I wasn't really Google bombing. But I built out all these sites, and it ended up pushing, they were all hyperlinking between each other, and it ended up pushing head trauma to the number 1 spot in a Google search. Which was very effective for me. In terms of when it came time to I have such a struggle with traditional distribution and non-traditional means. I find myself always kind of caught in between. I'm very about self-sustaining. I've been able to sustain and make my work from controlling the rights to my own work. For instance, the last broadcast, re-releasing it, repackaging it, selling it through multiple territories. So, in terms of head trauma, I did the 17-city theatrical release, which ended up yielding about $17,000, $18,000. Then I released the movie on DVD, and I found a label to work with. I had before started my own label, and I found myself 5 years of time managing it, dealing with returns, escrow accounts, all kinds of, it was just a nightmare of a time suck. So I just decided that I was going to find somebody to work with. So I found a small label, and I struck a deal that was like a $60-40 $1 split, which was very favorable. I leveraged the theatrical to get better terms on the DVD. And to date, we've sold, I guess, about 45,000 DVDs so far. When it came time, and this is the stuff I'm kind of most excited about. We went through the traditional routes. I did that stuff, and then I created an alternate soundtrack for the film called Cursed. And basically, you could line it up, and it just happens to be right there. You could line it up with the movie itself and to a special scene, kind of like Wizard of Oz and Dark Side of the Moon. And when you turn down the volume on the television and turn up the volume on the stereo, it would actually sync, and you get an alternate soundtrack. From there, I started doing these mashup screenings where I would kind of take the movie out, and I inverted what was typically a theatrical distribution model, where when I did my theatrical, it was a 50-50 split, right? You can either four-wall, I'm sure you guys, do you guys know what four-wall means? You're paying for the theater, and then you get 100% of the box, but you take all the risk. Or you can do splits, and I ended up doing splits with each of the venues. When it came time to do these mashup screenings, I changed the whole model around. I thought, I'm going to go to museums, I'm going to go to other alternative spaces, I'm going to request a minimum guarantee, and then I'm going to get a split on top of that. So when I went to walk in the door, I was already making money, before I even got there. So, I would get a minimum guarantee of like $5,000, and then I get 50% of the box office. So these screenings consisted of basically a couple different components. It was like movies, music, theatrics, gaming, and technology. And what that all means is when somebody came to the show, and we did one at the Museum of the Moving Image in New York, on their way to the screening, we wrote a script that rang all the payphones up and down the street, So as they were walking, payphones were ringing. And as they started to walk closer to the theater, I had a street preacher on the corner, kind of preaching fire and brimstone. And he had these, if anybody knows who Jack Chick is, he's a comic book artist, does these strange religious propaganda comics. And they're actually Stephen Bissett, who's a very famous comic book artist, worked a lot with Alan Moore, co-creator of Swamp Things and Constantine, was a fan of my first film, came out of retirement and inked a Jack Chick-esque comic that's used within the film. So I took that comic and I gave it to the street preacher, right? So he's out on the corner and nobody, people don't know what's going on. He's preaching, he's handing out these comics, and in the comics are all these hidden clues, right? So then when people made their way into the theater and they got inside, the movie was rescored live by DJs and musicians. Characters from the movie emerged from the audience and scared people at different times. And then people could use their cell phones to interact with the film. And what that means is they would receive text messages, they could call the film, characters would talk to them. And then the coolest part is when they left, once we captured their phone number, the movie would follow them home. So, and when I say it followed them home, we could basically text them or call them at any point we wanted. And in one particular instance, when they would go far enough, we would release a special like Easter egg. And that Easter egg would take them to a version of the comic. They could put their phone number in there and they could start moving through it. We would know where they were in the comic. We would execute a phone call. So all of a sudden their landline or their cell phone would ring, and it would be the hooded figure, the menacing character from the movie, and he'd be talking to them. And he'd say, tell me something about yourself that nobody knows. And he'd ask them all these questions, and based upon their response, yes or no, we would launch audio or video at them. And then when he did say that, tell me something about you that nobody knows, we would capture their audio through the phone, loop it back over the computer, so it would be playing over the computer so they'd hear themselves. And then when they went to close it, we built like a fake exit box. So they click on that. So then we knew they were clicking that. And so through the phone, we'd be like, where do you think we're going? We're not finished yet. So we did a lot of these like really kind of crazy things that would, just engage the audience. So in terms of, that was a rather large production to do that, and so when it came time to kind of amp it up, I wanted to scale it in some way. I wanted to try to do it in more than one place without as much upfront production time and everything that it took crew-wise to do it. So about, I guess we just finished it. We started another version of this alternate reality game, and what we did for it was I created a series of web videos. I created 4 of them, and it's a storyline about this girl, and it's called Hope is Missing. And it loosely ties into head trauma. Now, what's interesting about this is I took what was classically a promotional vehicle. So each week these web videos would be released. I went out and I positioned it as this alternate reality game. So there were all these clues that were basically in each of the videos. And I went and I said, I went to MySpace, I went to Xbox, I went to Stage 6, which is a DivX company. I went to all these different places, and I had this pitch. I was like, this is what I want to do basically with this. It's a game. And so I want to use social media as a game. I want to take what is classically a passive experience. I want to create these layers of interactivity. So somebody can just sit there and watch the videos if they choose to, or they can go a little bit deeper and they can interact with it, or they can find the clues that are hidden within it. And they can drill down as deep as they want. And once they find those clues, it would lead out to all these websites, hidden media, all kinds of other things that were online. What was really interesting about that was it was some of the most exhilarating stuff I've ever done. First of all, in 14 days, we had over 2 million views on it, all these people playing it. I received like 4,000 emails from it, 500 phone calls from it, in terms of people calling into the hotline that we had set up. And what was fascinating was the audience became collaborators within the story. The audience started passing it, started spreading it. So for instance, when we had like a MySpace page, these are actually frames that are in the comments section from MySpace from the actual video where people are sitting there, and it's not easy to pull frame grabs off of MySpace. You got to sit there and pause it. So people were watching the video over and over again, and then we'd lay in all these crazy ciphers and clues into them. So then what they were doing was decoding these things, sharing them with each other, and they were playing as teams. So on any given night, I could go and I could watch, and I was a mole, I have to admit. I was in on a lot of the chats that they would do and stuff. There'd be like 60 people talking for hours about this promotional thing that we did, about this game. And the most valuable part, because at the end of the day, it all comes back to like, okay, well, that's great. It's giving value to what you're doing promotionally. But I designed it so it would be its own IP. I designed it so at the end, I was taking this it was a proof of concept for for a whole new property, right? It was a whole new story. I was able to take the game, it was very successful, and I was able to turn around and actually now it's going to be a fully funded game that'll start running in the spring, with a budget of $400,000. Now, that's just a promotional thing that I'm doing, but I'm looking at it and saying, wow, it all kind of feeds itself. It's like a Mobius strip or something, It's like in this digital world, there are no rules to it. And it's like, why not? If I'm going to go and all of a sudden have that many millions of people watching this, why can't I turn around and sell it? Why can't I find new ways to create revenue? And so it's not typical that you would take a promotional thing and actually then have that thing become profitable. So I thought that was kind of interesting in terms of a model. But I think the key to the game was the layers of interactivity. Some people just want a passive experience. Some people want more. It just depends. I mean, I think what I've been seeing a lot and what I saw from the exit surveys that we did on the game, we did about 350 people. They spent anywhere from 8 hours on average playing this thing to some of them played for like 40 hours. So that's an incredible amount of time that people were spending with what effectively is this game that then leads into what effectively was the VOD release of the movie through Warner Brothers in the States. And I should say that I just licensed that to Warner Brothers for the VOD portion, and I'm working with a sales agent to do television in the States. But Warner Brothers wasn't going to do any promotion for the film. They weren't going to do anything. And what's interesting is not only did the promotion flip itself into something that became financially sound for me, it also resulted in, pay and basic cable deals entering the equation for the movie and just created a lot more interest in outlets that were picking it up for VOD. So, I think that in terms of models, when the rubber hits the road and you say, okay, well, it's great, we're talking about all these theories, and granted, what works for me or what works for Aaron and Susan might be different for you. I think the one thing to really consider is how you can think outside that box, how you can really kind of empower yourself and find those things that work for you, So that's pretty much where I am now. And moving forward into my next film, what I'm going to do is continue to build the worlds that I'm very interested in. And when I say worlds, I mean, like I said before, something that transcends one screen. So characters can live away from that screen. In some ways, they can live in the real world too. And I think in a lot of ways, the future of entertainment is moving in that direction with a collision of all these things. Music, movies, gaming. So that's basically what I have. So I can open it up now for questions. I have 5 minutes of questions? Okay, sure.
Firstly, thanks so much. It was absolutely amazing and so inspiring.
Thanks.
I just wondered what kind of team you have working alongside you. It sounds as if it's a formidable amount of work.
It's so much work.
Yeah.
I have my wife, and I have a friend that I work with. We do a lot of tech consulting together. And that's pretty much it. I mean, a lot of the stuff, and I should bring up this one last thing, because I talk about it. Is there any way we can have the screen again for the computer? Anyway, I do a lot of kind of tech consulting, so I have a technical background. And I wanted to plug this real quick. This is a free site. Everything that I talked about, I turn around and I give away for free. So this is under a Creative Commons license, non-commercial, share alike. And basically, it's all kinds of Web 2.0 and the bridge between technology and filmmaking, all kinds of new business models, all types of stuff. So it's workbookproject.com. But, and I run that, I just do that on my own. And we have contributors from all over the world now, which is really cool. So if anybody in the room ever wants to contribute something, we'd love to hear from you. We're hoping that it'll become a repository of information, because the real goal is to get it to the point of where it's a boilerplate for filmmakers, as opposed to when a distributor gives you a boilerplate. We want to make it so filmmakers they know what the deal terms are, they know what to carve away for themselves, they know how to best protect their interests. So information is the key to that. So if you know anybody that's looking for information, it's a free resource. But to answer your question, I don't sleep very much, and I work a ton. So. Oh, yes. Sorry about that.
It's really interesting. The last 2 or 3 presentations have been about really unique projects, like what Aaron and Susan have done, what you've been doing, the guy that's been doing the documentaries. They're very niche. They're individual. It almost seems like film is just a part of that. And are you guys now marketeers, or are you filmmakers? I mean, it's almost like you're creating products that are very discreet and very niche vertical markets. I mean, what do you think?
Well,
I don't think there's a boilerplate. I think that's my point.
Yeah, well, I think that basically what it is I think the reality of the situation is we find ourselves in a time where you can't really wear one hat anymore. You know, you have to be able to have the knowledge or at least know how you want to reach people. Because at the end of the day, if you want to actually work independently, I find myself having to wear many hats, you know, a business hat, a technology hat, a filmmaking hat. It's ironic the amount of time, and I'm sure anybody in the room knows, the amount of time that you actually spend on set, the amount of time that you actually spend with actors, you know, and you're always on a quest to get back to that particular aspect, you know. But I think in terms of the model, there is no real model for it. You know, I think people find it one way or the other. They find it, they go out, and I think there's a big misconception. I know it's very large in the United States and numerous other countries where I've spoken, where it's the festival is the gate. You know, you go to the festival, you go to one of the major festivals, you sell your film, and then everything else happens. The slipper fits, there's lightning in the bottle, and everything's great, you know. Well, the reality is it isn't like that. And for the vast majority of people, it won't be. And so I think you get to a certain point where you realize you have control over your own destiny, or you can sit and you can wait for somebody to give you permission. So I think more and more you're going to see people doing exactly what we're doing, because as the market becomes oversaturated, the only way that you can really get it out or break through that static is to have some command over how you want to reach that audience. Now, I'm not saying that everybody in the room has to do the way we did it. You can find other people who can help you do it. You know, the one thing that is fortunate is people still think, for whatever reason, that filmmaking is glamorous. You know, so, you know, tap that, you know. So, are we good? Anybody else have any other questions? I flew all the way here, please.
Hi, Lance.
Hey.
In the example that you were talking about, where Warners are distributing the DVD and you're doing this marketing promotion,
It's actually VOD.
so VOD, big one.
Yeah.
It's quite unusual that you could go to a distributor and say, "Do you mind if I market my own movie?" They would typically say, "That's what we do." So how did you manage to get them to agree to that? And going forward commercially, would you anticipate that what you do in that space, you could even look to see come off the top as a marketing tool for the film?
Well, first and foremost, I think I didn't wait for Warner Brothers to let me do it. I just did it, and then I told them that I was doing it. So I think that was probably a big difference. You know, sometimes I think if I would have asked them for permission, they probably would have said no. You know, so because I didn't, and I just went and did it, and then all of a sudden I had the momentum, and it was like I leveraged all the different parts. You know, I went and I said, look, Warner Brothers is doing this VOD, you know, and then I said, Xbox, here, I'm working with this party, so forth and so on, and I constructed this whole thing. So in that sense, in the end, at first they were baffled by it. They didn't know what I was doing. They had no idea. They were like, game, what, huh? You know, to them it's like a machine. It's like they're just stamping cogs, you know, making widgets, whatever they're doing there. And, you know, a little film like Head Trauma, they're not even paying attention to. So, but then once they started to realize the reach, then they became very excited about it, and then they kind of woke up to it and they were interested in it.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what point are you going to, for your future stuff, at what point are you going to, how are you thinking about balancing the need to keep an element of surprise for the finished work against releasing lots of stuff for marketing, sort of, in film, you know, marketing as it goes? I mean, have you got a new take on it as a result of Head Trauma?
Yeah. I think in terms of releasing work and not spoiling the experience, you know, in terms of when I'm writing now, I'm actually writing things into the script that, you know, like all of a sudden on the side of a wall, something's scrawled, and you're not sure what that means, what the significance is, and it's almost like the ability to have backstory that you've never had before, or the ability to tease something that's going to come after. So I think I have a pretty good understanding of what I can get away with and what I can't. So I think Head Trauma was a great experiment for, You know, because there is a concern. I mean, studios typically will only release trailers. You know, sometimes that's because the movies suck. Other times it's because, you know, they're afraid that if too much gets out, that people won't go and see it. You know, but I think in terms of that release, I mean, I think there's a lot of things you can do. I'm interested in the stuff that's more story-based. You know, in some ways, I think some of it might be behind the scenes of certain aspects. You know, in the DVD for Head Trauma has a whole bunch of that stuff. You know, for instance, when we build our own aerials, we have aerial shots in it. We did it with a powered parachute and like $60, rubber bands and aluminum. We built our own rig, and I paid the guy a case of beer, you know, after he flew. So that stuff are things that, you know, I think are important when you do web, no matter what, you know, being able to share that. I think there's an important releasing structure to it, and when you release it, it's like how you would do promotion for anything else, you know. There's a time and a place for it, so. But thank you so much.
Thank you.